I'll cut to the chase because that's how it began. They showed up as a unit, took their seats at my newly sanded wooden table, and demanded my granddaughter's college fund, my son, his wife, and the girl herself, and me, Thomas Rourke, Tom to just about everyone, read the fund out loud. I read every line like I was pulling the pin on a grenade and still keeping my cool. I said, "That's not how it works." It was a Tuesday. Boise had that stubborn mist that stains the sky without washing anything clean. It was 6 in the evening, word for word in the text Mark sent. "Dad, we need to talk today. Subject, Haley's fund. It's urgent." I'm the kind of man who likes things with an owner and written instructions. For decades, I was treasurer and then bursar at the College of Western Idaho. I lived on lines, commas, and deadlines. I retired to a wood bungalow on North 17th Street, about 4 blocks from Camel's Back Park. My days ran like a clock. Strong coffee in the beat-up Boise Hawks mug, a loop with Walter, my lab who smells rain before any weatherman, and half an hour at the bench in the garage tinkering with a red Craftsman toolbox that belonged to my father. At 62, I still had that useful rigidity. You'll see. When the door opened, I felt Walter tuck himself against my feet, the way he does when he scents a storm. Mark came in with his beard a little too well trimmed for someone who didn't have time for lunch. Brittany had an iPad under her arm, smile wound tight, and Haley, my granddaughter, held herself small in that way I recognize. Borrowed shame from the adults. The house smelled like cut apple and the leather in my old Subaru, warmed by the garage heater, a heat that comforts and warns. "Dad," Mark started, no preamble. "We closed on a place on Vista Avenue and the repair estimate came in higher. I need to pull from Haley's 529, part of it now. We'll use it and then put it back. It's family. It all stays in the family. Plus, Haley decided to do a tech boot camp before college. The fund covers it." Brittany researched. Brittany flipped the iPad around. Photos of young people smiling over expensive laptops, and down below, "Full stack boot camp, 12 weeks. I read the price that winked like a firefly, about 13.5 grand, out loud, out of habit. "And I wanted a car, Grandpa." Haley let slip in a voice that wasn't quite hers, borrowed, like the shame. "I mean, I'd need one, for freelancing and the boot camp." I took a breath. The first rule of Treasury has always been, breathe, square the papers, then speak. And that's when I dropped the question that opened the room like a hatch. "First, who owns Haley's 529? "It's hers, obviously," Mark shot back too fast. I went to the office and came back with the blue folder. "Ideal 529, Haley." I set on the table the document I'd read a dozen times since I opened the account, back in 2010. Disclosure Statement and Participation Agreement. I'd underlined in orange the lines almost nobody underlines. I opened to page 1, the part that says who's in charge. "Account owner, Thomas Rourke," I read, slow enough for the whole house to hear. "Beneficiary, Haley Rourke." And below that, "Only the account owner may request withdrawals, change the beneficiary, or make other account changes." Who can pull money? The owner, not the dad, not the mom, not the neighbor from Instagram. The owner. Mark rolled his eyes. "Dad, you're being literal. It's for her. I'm her father. And I'm the retired bursar. Literal keeps the lights on." They wanted the fund now. I read the fund out loud. I said, "That's not how it works." And I had no idea that that same night a signed rule would hold a family by the keel. If you think this was old man overkill, just wait to see what came next, and how my revenge, yes, revenge, used no shouting, no grudges, it used paper. If you've ever found yourself having to protect someone you love from the hurry of the very people who should protect them, stick with me. I promise 2 things. First, it'll sting a little when I talk about messy numbers. Second, you'll smile when you hear the line that became a toast in my house. My name is Tom, and I'm from Boise, Idaho, for as long as I can remember. The Treasure Valley has a dry kind of light I learned to measure by radio. On static-free nights, the baseball game comes in clean, and I know the sky's just the right temperature for my knee to quit complaining. My life was and still is a spreadsheet that went right. First job as an assistant in treasury, then treasurer, then bursar. And bursar, the way my mother would have understood it. The man who handles the college bill, the one who opens the envelope and says we pay, or we don't because he read the fine print. 30-some years of that routine left me with two habits: strong coffee and signed paper. The Boise Hawks mug with the old logo was cup and gavel. It warmed my hand and knocked the table when someone wanted to argue without facts. My toolbox was my father's, that red Craftsman cross-hatched with scratches like a topo map of a life. Walter, my lab, was a gift from a girlfriend who turned into a soft memory. On the back shelf sat a big radio that only comes in truly clear when the humidity finally has the decency to back off. I had a son, Mark, 42 when all this happened, who likes to flip houses. He likes short timelines, fresh paint, construction interest, the thrill of closing and reopening faster than joint compound dries. He's good, partly because he's charming, partly because he was born with the gift of talk that convinces, partly because I was always nearby to run the math backward when he wanted to pretend profit was a noun without adjectives. Brittany, Mark's wife, runs social media. She says engagement like she's talking about a miracle. Every event becomes content, every sentence a narrative. I like her. I've also watched her use that trade to push life the way you push a shopping cart, without noticing the weight at the bottom of the ramp. They have two kids. Haley, 17, plays the violin in a way that would have made my ex-mother-in-law cry. She's always talked biology, microscopes, life you can move with your hands. And Chase, 15, runs cross-country with a line of focus I envy. When he goes quiet, I swear I can hear his mind calling out the next marker. The story you're about to hear, my story, really began back in 2010, when Haley's mother got sick in a way that was fast and cruel. I won't give you details that don't help. What matters is, I promised in a hospital hallway that smelled like disinfectant and blinking machines. That girl's education wouldn't depend on the wind. The next week I opened a 529, the ideal Idaho's college savings plan. I put my name down as the owner and Haley's as the beneficiary. An account for school and only school. Every month $150. On birthdays I'd top it off. When I said 150, it sounded small. The first time I wrote a little over 42.5 grand, give or take, on the statement, 15 years later, the account gave me a pat on the shoulder. What gives money its value isn't just the number, it's the use. And I locked that use down with a seal a lot of folks call overkill. I read Ideal's disclosure statement and participation agreement front to back, orange pen, underlines, notes in the margin. I called the helpline twice to ask about eligible institution. I did it because being a bursar taught me contracts aren't for reading after the trouble hits. They're for keeping trouble out. And a 529 to most people is a seven-headed beast disguised as simple. Put money in, take it out whenever you want. It isn't. I learned to love the fine print. Only the account owner may request withdrawals. I could have put that on a plaque in my hallway. Qualified higher education expenses. I read it out loud so many times it turned into a mantra. Tuition, fees, books, required materials, equipment the school asks for, housing if the student's at least half-time, a computer, internet, even a lifetime cap of about 10 grand to pay student loans, and up to 10 grand a year for K through 12, depending on the state. Plus, if the house wants to get cute, that's not how this works. I minted that line for myself and kept it. There were years when Mark asked for just a little advance. One winter, when the roof on a North End place he'd bought took an unexpected beating, he showed up looking like a kid. Dad, a little over $2,800. I'll pay you back in 2 months. I lent it. He paid me back in 3. I wrote it down. My way of getting even with life has always been this. Instead of anger, a record, numbers, dates. Who promised what? Not because I wanted interest. Because I know the human I raised, smart, quick, big-hearted, and allergic to the word plan. Haley, for her part, has always been no frills. One afternoon at the Flying M Coffee House, she told me the sounds from the school lab were prettier than Instagram. I said the prettiest thing of all was a report card full of A's, and we both laughed. Walter slept at our feet, a soft snore, and I had that old urge to thank whatever keeps quiet. By the time Brittany showed up with the iPad on that rainy Tuesday, I'd already called Ideal the day before to ask about a certain boot camp making the rounds. Fancy title, promises of a job in 12 weeks, the usual. I asked straight, "Is it eligible for a 529? The man on the other end, attentive as could be, said, "No, sir, it doesn't have Title IV. It's not an eligible educational institution." I thanked him like someone putting clean rounds back in the box. So when Mark said, "It's family, it all stays in the family," the blood rose in my face, not from anger but from alarm. I've watched family stuff become the door Det walks through. I wasn't opening it, not for the 529, not for Haley. I wasn't going to be the old man who fell asleep at the wheel of the thing he promised in that hospital hallway. If you think that's controlling, pocket the word. It'll come back, and when it does, you'll hear who said it, in what tone, and what I did with it. "The site says it's qualified," Brittany insisted, folding her arms like someone crossing a buoy in choppy water. "Their site says that," I answered. "The IRS decides. Publication 970 and Ideal confirms. I called, it isn't eligible. A car then isn't anywhere near education." Mark huffed. "Dad, for the love. The place on Vista is an opportunity. It's different. An opportunity without a budget is just a well-told story," I said without raising my voice. "And a well-told story without paper is wind." Haley looked at me, and I saw thirst. Not for a car, not for Instagram. Thirst to be taken seriously. So I did something that might sound odd. I went back to reading. I pointed to the non-qualified withdrawals section and spoke slowly, the way I used to with a nervous student in the bursar's line who was afraid to ask. When you pull money for something that isn't qualified, the growth, the part that came from investing, turns into taxable income, plus a 10% penalty. And here in Idaho, there's state tax recapture. If you think it's just $8,000 for a car, for example, it isn't just. A proportional slice of that comes out of the gains. That slice gets taxed, and it gets the penalty. I ran the numbers. With our balance, call it just under $29,500 in contributions and around $13 and some change in growth. Every withdrawal that ignores the rules hurts. It hurts the wallet, and it hurts the promise. "You threatening me with math?" Mark said with that sarcasm he reaches for when the conversation bumps into what he can't control. "No. I'm reminding you numbers don't have opinions. I'm the owner of the account. I decide. And I'm going to decide for what I promised. Haley's education." I could have stopped there. That's when the circle of tension tightened. And like every circle, it narrowed before it opened. "We're her parents," Mark said, slapping the table. "You don't decide like that in front of us. Haley needs a car, she needs the boot camp, and we demand the fund now." The word demand hit the floor like a heavy screwdriver. Walter lifted his head. Brittany gripped the iPad harder, like someone bracing on a roller coaster. And Haley did the most adult thing anyone did in that room. She dropped her gaze to the wood, breathed, and spoke without asking permission from fashion or trend. I want to go to Moscow, University of Idaho, biology. I have the letter ready. Dad and Brittany think a boot camp is the future. I just didn't want to fight." The silence that followed was full of refrigerator noise. I've told you that. I realized two things at once. Mark's fear wasn't just about money. It was about not being able to steer a future that wouldn't need his lift. And Brittany's urgency had another name, the algorithm she serves. Everything has to happen as fast as a content launch. School isn't that, life even less. Out of date is not knowing how to add, I said. "If you get in, Haley, I'll pay tuition straight to the university, straight to the bursar. No checks in anyone's hand. That protects you, and it protects me. Then we'll talk housing, books, a computer, with an invoice, with a letterhead, with a student number, and we'll talk the rest with you, not for you." That's when I pulled the two papers I'd kept in the back of the folder, like cards you only play when the table forgets the rules. The beneficiary change form and the successor owner designation. I pointed at the lines. Read them slowly. Explained without theatrics. If the pressure kept up, I'd change the beneficiary. Not a threat. Protection. And if I went early, the owner's name and last name were already set. My sister, Marion, who learns rules faster than she learns a new recipe. And there's one more thing, I said, and saw Mark's eyebrow climb. The new rule. Secure 2.0 opens a door to convert part of an old 529 up to about 35 grand into a Roth IRA in the beneficiary's name if certain boxes are checked. Know what that means? If there's money left, Haley can carry it into her retirement. But that only works if we don't shred the plan now. You've always been like this. Controlling. Mark shot back, softer than before. That controlling came from an old drawer. I knew it, and it hurt, not as an insult, as a memory. And you've always treated plan like a personal insult, I said. Son, you're good at what you do when you do it with a budget. Don't use my granddaughter to patch a cash hole. Not while I've got a pulse. That closed the first loop of tension and opened another. Mark stood. Brittany stood with him. Haley stayed between us with a kind of courage that fits in a 17-year-old. The story could have turned into shouting. It didn't because I invented a document on the spot. I pulled from the folder a sheet with my house letterhead, Rourke House, that I use for official stubbornness. And out loud, I read Grandpa's policy for Haley's fund. I read it the way I used to read to an anxious 19-year-old in line who thought a spreadsheet was poetry. No bullet points, paragraphs, voice that lands but doesn't shove. Payment goes straight to an eligible institution. Expenses must be eligible under the rules. Tuition, fees, books, required materials. Housing for at least half-time students. A computer, internet. Cars, non-eligible boot camps and the like. No. Statements shared with the beneficiary each term. If family pressure keeps up, the beneficiary will be changed. Leftovers after graduation can go to grad school, to a Roth if it fits, or to a sibling who studies. I signed it. I dated it. I closed with 3 lines I wanted them to hear like bells. I love you. I protect Haley and I sleep well when I follow the paper. They left without a hug. The door closed softer than Mark wanted. My hinge has a sense of humor. The house smelled like apple and something done right. And while I washed the knife, I thought about what would come next. Pressure likes to find another door. It did. The next morning, my phone woke up blinking. Brittany had posted in the family group. A well-designed little graphic. Entrepreneurship is study. Underneath, a paragraph saying Haley had a golden opportunity for a 12-week boot camp that would put her in the market in record time, and that the elders in the family were a little behind the times. I breathed. I didn't answer. Sometimes a bursar's revenge is silence with dates and documents. You just wait for the invoice to land. Mark texted me 2 hours later. Dad, I read your policy. You went overboard. Let's pull just 8 grand for a used car, just that. I'll put it back fast. The word just twice. I answered with the 3 words that became mine. That's not how. Then I went quiet. The circle squeezed a bit more when late afternoon, the phone lit with an unknown number. Salesman from the boot camp. Mr. Rourke, Brittany gave me your contact. We can do installments. We've got grads placed at big companies. Are you an eligible institution? I asked. A short silence. Well, we don't work with Title IV, but we have... Thank you. I hung up before the testimonials. I felt something between anger and pity. Anger at a system that hunts the anxious. Pity for anyone who thinks an improvised diploma is a net. That same day, Haley, out of the blue, sent me a photo of the school lab. Clean bench, microscope. A small pencil note. Grandpa, does it still count? Moscow? I replied with another photo, the blue folder, and I wrote, it counts, and there's someone already reading on your behalf. I didn't know that photo would mark the turn, because in the scramble of a man who demands someone else's fund to plug a flip, fate likes to send an audit. And when it shows up, it doesn't ask your schedule's permission. The turn began quietly, the way most good turns do. 2 days after our meeting, I took Haley for hot chocolate at the Flying M on 8th Street. She held the cup like it was a second chance. I handed her the blue folder like a map, not like buried treasure. And I said, without any hero talk, "This is your future. Read it when you're sad. Read it when you're unsure. Read it when someone promises a shortcut. The key is inside and your name's on the first page. But I'm holding the lock until I see an invoice with the university's letterhead." She laughed. And a teenager's laugh that still fits in Grandpa's front seat can smooth a cracked road. We sat a good while, talking about dorms, riding a bike in the rain, clothes drying on the top bunk rail. I told her stories about goofs I'd watched in the bursar's office. Bills that doubled because we ignored the fine print. I said numbers have tastes. They like precision. They don't like just this once. The next week, the letter from the University of Idaho came. Admitted. Haley burst into my yard, headband slipping, yelling from the gate that she got in. Walter ran in circles, sure the party was for him. I hugged my granddaughter and felt the weight of a promise half kept. The other half was paying. That same morning, my inbox got the estimated billing statement, fall. There it was, in-state tuition just under 10 grand. Housing and a meal plan about 11. Books a little over $1,000. Fees close to 900. Subtotal 23 and change. I did what I've done my whole life. Picked up the phone, called Ideal. A helpful young man, Trent, picked up. I like people who give their full name. We verified the university's employer ID number, Haley's student ID, the amount of the first tranche. I requested a qualified distribution straight to the University of Idaho. 4 days later, and here when I say 4 days, I mean 4 sunups you can feel, not a stopwatch. I got confirmation. Payment applied. I printed the email, "I'm that guy," and stapled it into the folder. I sent Haley a card I made in Word with a clip art mortarboard more crooked than it should be. I wrote, "Grandpa's grant, no red tape with paper. Congratulations. The 529 went to work today. Love, Grandpa Tom." I know it sounds cheesy, I hope it does. Some kinds of cheesy hold houses together. Then came the attempted workaround. 2 nights later, Mark messaged me. Late. Not a good night. A screenshot of a chat with Brittany. A plan B. They were thinking of having Haley sign a paper authorizing the 529 because she's the beneficiary. Mark was typing fast. Typos are born from anxiety. I called him. Instead of arguing by text, I chose a voice. "Son, a beneficiary doesn't sign with an owner's power. I showed you. And I told you about the successor owner. It's already filled in. If I go early, Marion holds this. And more. I logged our grandpa policy with a date. You're asking your daughter to sign a fake out. I won't tolerate that for her sake and for yours. You don't want to be that father." Silence on the other end. And in Mark's silence I heard, go ahead and laugh at the image. The sound of joint compound drying without a fan. A crust of pride starting hairline cracks. He muttered that he got it, that he was under pressure, that the rehab on Vista had jumped by almost 27.5 grand because of a plumbing surprise. I stayed in my kitchen chair, looking at the apple I'd left on the cutting board, and said what fit. "The project is yours. School belongs to your daughter. I'll help with a budget for the project if you want. I won't help with Haley's money for the project. If you want, show up tomorrow morning with a detailed cost breakdown. We'll go line by line, but stop trying to dodge the documents. That's not your way, and I won't let it be." The next day, he didn't show. Pride wakes up slow. Life kept moving. Brittany skipped the dinner we had to celebrate the letter. She sent a confetti emoji and a flat, "Congrats." I assumed that in silence, shame does what likes don't. It matures. Fall rolled into Moscow with its fat leaves, and Haley sent me photos of laundry spinning in industrial machines and a bike shining under misty rain. I, for my part, became a regular in the university portal. Bill paid, bill open, bill projected. I filled out Form 1099-Q like a Sunday crossword. I was feeling useful, and that's how I got the call from Mark. I didn't want and still expected. "Dad," he said, no cushions. It went south, Vista. The inspector found things, costs blew past the line, I'm in the red. I said some hard things about myself you didn't need to hear, but I'll say them anyway. I was stubborn. I didn't say, I told you so. I offered what I always offer when my son's on the floor. Paper, budget, lines, commas. Come over, bring everything, we'll read it out loud. I'll help you fix it. What I won't do is sign with Haley's money. He laughed out of one corner of his mouth. In our family, that laugh is an apology with pride still standing. It's where we set the first slate of a reconciliation. I didn't know my revenge would get a little stage the next Sunday. Not a stage with lights, one with a grill and uncle's voices. The public counterpunch wasn't in the city paper. It was in the paper I printed on my own machine called the Rourke Bulletin. And if you thought I wasn't going to use my bursar streak to educate a crowd, you don't know me. Ironically, it was Brittany who gave me the idea for the exposure. She had a habit of doing content night on Sundays. A family photo in the backyard, a motivational caption, a gratitude hashtag. I decided to borrow the format and fix the content. I invited the family over for a simple cookout. Sausages, corn, Aunt Marion's potato salad, yes, I called her, and a table by the porch with a stack of stapled pages I titled Rourke Bulletin, Special Edition 529. When everyone had finished a first plate and the glasses were about halfway down, I stood up and said, "No mic, no theatrics. I've got a brief report, not about politics, about paper. It's short, promise." I handed out the bulletins. The cover had a subtitle, Money for Study, and only that. Below it, a plain-spoken paragraph, no list. I explained what a 529 is. I wrote that the account owner isn't whoever yells loudest. It's whoever's on the document. I mentioned qualified expenses with easy examples. Tuition, fees, books, required materials, a computer, internet, housing if you're at least half-time. I said that if you try to use it for a car or a course you can't measure, the account pays you back in taxes and penalties. I gave an example that stings. If you pull $8 grand and your account looks something like this, just under 29.5 in contributions and around 13 and change in gains. A slice of that withdrawal is gains, and that slice pays tax and a penalty. Nobody wants that. I wrote, that's not how it works, and thank goodness. In the second paragraph, I said Haley got in. I printed University of Idaho big because, let's be honest, it makes for a good photo. I said the first bill was paid. I attached the receipt. I wrote, email, the 529 went to work on Tuesday, and it'll go to work again next term. I used we because I believe in a we that paper protects. In the third paragraph, I did the part some folks call exposure, and I call teaching with an audience. I wrote without names and without poison. There was pressure to use the 529 for other things. I, as the account owner and as a grandfather who follows the rule, chose not to give in. There was tension. There was even the idea of making the beneficiary sign an authorization that doesn't exist. We talked, we chose the rule, and we moved on. I didn't look at Mark then. I looked at Haley. From the corner of my eye, I saw Brittany bite her lip and slip the phone into her pocket. I saw Aunt Marion nudge her glasses like she was saying, "I'm here." I saw Chase, who usually just runs, lift his head and actually listen. And he asked the question that opened the classroom door. "Uncle Tom, if there's money left in the 529, can you use it later?" "You can, kid," I said, glad for it. Grad school. A technical program that's eligible. Even a chance, under certain conditions, to roll a slice into a Roth IRA in the student's name. The new law opened that door with guardrails. "And if there isn't any left?" Aunt Marion teased. "Because that girl looks like she's going to do a lot. If there isn't, we raise a glass, because the money went where it was supposed to go." That's where the public counterpunch found its spot. It wasn't humiliation. It was class. The whole family, Brittany's in-laws included, listened, and like any good class, there was a little catharsis. Brittany raised her hand. I swear she raised her hand like a student. "Tom, I was wrong about the car. I was anxious. I wanted to fix it fast. I know the internet runs that way, and I dragged that pace in here, I'm sorry. I'm not the kind of man who wastes an apology. I looked at her and said, "Thank you for saying it, and thanks for coming today. You're not alone. Hurry lives inside all of us. We just can't let it drive Haley's car." Mark, quiet till then, looked at the paper and finally at me. His face had that shift of someone who took the wrong fork and needs to circle back without an illegal U-turn. He spoke low. "You read it out loud that day because you figured I wouldn't hear it any other way, didn't you? I read it because you and I have always understood each other when there's paper between us," I said. "And because that's not how this works. Not with Haley. Not with what we promised." The afternoon went on the way families do, laughing, telling stories that tidy the past to fit the present. Kids running, adults clearing the table, a dog sneaking bites of sausage he shouldn't have. I went inside and stuck the bulletin on the fridge with a giant potato magnet I bought as a joke at a street fair. Someone took a photo and posted it. I didn't mind. Sometimes the best exposure is the kind that makes shame switch sides with an honest caption. Family learning. The next day, Mark's phone rang different. He sent me the Vista budget, line by line. I went through it with a pen, no fighting. We found waste. We found gaps. We found items costing twice what they should because time is money and let's move. I showed him, in dollars that hurt, how that philosophy was charging interest. $5,000 here, $3,700 there, $2,800 and change in late fees that 3 phone calls could have avoided. When he saw it, he laughed the nervous laugh and said, "I've owed you this class for years." I said, "I've owed you the whiteboard." The revenge happened, but not the way angry people imagine. Revenge was this. The rule protected the person who needed protecting, and the one who tried to cut it got turned back at the door, dusting his shoes on the way in. No humiliation, just enough audience so the lesson wouldn't get lost to time. Time, riding Idaho's autumn wind, taught our house to breathe on the right beat. Haley brought home sweet grades at the end of her first term. An A in intro bio, a B+ in calculus, an A- in English. Told her grades are numbers and numbers become the next bill. She laughed because she already knew I'd say it. I paid the spring bill with the satisfaction of a wrench finding the right nut. In the bursar's portal, that little paid chime rang like a school bell. I printed the receipt. Yes, I printed it, and stapled it into the blue folder, now dog-eared in a way that made me proud. The 529's balance got smaller for reasons that don't sting. It turned into study hours, underlined pages, and a shared lunch in the cafeteria. Sometimes Chase called to ask how much engineering costs. I said, "It depends. Depends on the campus. Depends on your patience with physics. Depends on whether you want to live closer to the quad or the park." He answered with a silence that sounds like respect. I chose to believe it was. Brittany started posting photos of Haley in the lab, captioned "Proud." Her content learned to look at what happens off-screen. Mark showed up on my porch with a box of donuts from Guru Donuts. I'm not a sweets guy, but like any rule, that one bends when it's your kid. We sat and looked at Camel's Back the way you watch the same landscape on different days. He spoke, eyes on the ridge. "Dad, thanks for not throwing me out of your house when I raised my voice." "Walter would have barked first," I said, nodding at the lab. "I would have just opened the door." He laughed. We both did. And he opened a folder, here comes the circle again, with a new budget. Now the lines had a contingency column. They had delay allowances. They had the number nobody likes to write at the start. Planned surprises. I looked at him like you look for the first time at someone writing in his own hand. "You read it out loud that day," he said again. "I think it was the only way I could hear you." "It was the way I could hear myself too," I said. I forgot for a day that respect gets read, signed, and kept. And I remembered when I opened that folder. Revenge is a heavy word. People picture shouting, tires screeching, a slammed door. Mine was quiet and signed. I read the fund out loud. I kept my hand steady. I showed the paper to the people who needed to see it. I put the promise from a hospital hallway ahead of the rush of a flip with crooked plumbing. And in the end, the one who apologized wasn't life. It was the man I raised who, that day, stepped back into being a son, with a humility that takes nothing from anyone. On the living room shelf, beside the radio that only pulls in baseball without static when the air is on my side, I taped up a sheet with 4 lines. Not bullet points. Sentences I say in my natural voice whenever someone here tries to drag a shortcut onto the table. I say the one who owns it decides and reads. I say use rules, save relationships. I say education is an expense and hurry is a penalty. I say that's not how it works. And thank goodness. Haley gave me a drawing for Christmas. It's in a cheap frame in the hallway, right at a height where an old man can read without bending his neck. It's our wooden table. The 2 of us seated. Walter sprawled, the blue folder open. On top she wrote, "That's not how it works." I walk past it every day on my way to the kitchen for coffee. It's my reminder that a quiet tool is still a tool. If Haley ever asks why I read the fund out loud, I'll give her the simple truth. Because respect sometimes needs a voice. Because some people only learn by listening. Because her future had an owner, with a first and last name on that paper. And I wasn't about to let a "we demand" yank the pen from her hand. The rest I'll leave to the sounds of my house. Walter's soft rumble when the dream is good. The leaves shivering on 17th Street. And that kind little chime in the bursar's portal when a bill flips to paid. That chime, I'll admit, I like to hear twice. Once on the screen, and once in here, where the right payments settle an older debt. The one a grandfather took on, signed, and when it mattered, read out loud. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about the story in the comments. See you in the next one.